story that must be told. Here's a little story that must be told. Here's a little story. Here's a little story.
My name is Olisa, aka Spyc-E, the one and only, and I'm born and raised right here, Seattle, 206, representing CD, South End, all that. When Beat Street came out, it was like a big deal. My sisters got to go to the premiere at the movie theater. I didn't get to go. And then Break-In came out. They also went to that. So it was like big. One of my sisters, she would have me memorize raps while she did my hair. That was like a thing she liked me because I was young and she thought it was really cute. So I remember the first rap that I learned was the Christmas rap from Beat Street. I might have been like 6 years old or something like that. The ho, 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 open up the door. Yeah, yeah, right. That was the one. That was my first rap that I learned. But my mom also exposed me to a lot of like dead poets, and so rhythmic poetry was always a thing, even before it was hip hop. Rap was always there. Home is jam bands. Home is music at every turn. Like every birthday party was a jam session. My mom's a musician, my dad's a musician, all my sisters write or play or sing. The interesting part is you're always encouraged to play music. So also the culture of performance. I was performing very, very young, probably since I was like 3 or so, since I could stand at a microphone. And I was in a family band my whole life. So we were always rehearsing, performing, so that mechanism of rehearsal, performance, songwrite, rehearsal, perform. My first solo gig in a bar, I was 9 years old at the Wild Rose, a lesbian bar on Capitol Hill. I think it still might be there. I know there was a battle to save the Wild Rose when it was going to get shut down. So, yeah, I mean, it's just a different life. Like, we all would load up the equipment together. We're loading in, I'm like, remember being 12, loading up to a loading dock, and setting up, plugging in all the stuff, and sound checking. It was just always part of the way. Pay has not changed. It was $50 a night when I was a kid. They're still trying to pay you like $50. It's like that changed since the 1920s or something like that. The nightly rate. I'm a poet. I've always been a poet, and I'm writing song lyrics and poetry since I was, I don't know. My mom talks about songs and poems I wrote when I was little. When I started actually rapping, I was probably 11 years old. My sister, she is a producer. She's amazing. She writes amazing music. She was writing her first hip-hop beat specifically, and she called me in, and she said, hey, you do that poetry stuff. I want you to write a rap. Can you do that? And I was like, yeah, no problem. I can do that. And I did it, and I brought it back to her, the verse, and I read it, and she circled those last 2 lines and crossed out the rest and told me to go do it again. And I did it again, and then she set up a gig for me because I liked it. So I wrote a few more songs. I remember they're very childish now, but that was a child, so it makes sense. It was like the alphabet rhyme and education and like very, I did have a few like more heavy songs like Soldier of Crack and Was It All Worth It, because I was rapping about what was going on around the neighborhood. Not only could I express for myself, but for folks who couldn't necessarily tell their own stories. Like my cousin, she wasn't really a poet or one to speak out, but she was living a life that I felt needed to be talked about. She was dealing with crack addiction, and she was dealing with having to survive within this household. And so with her permission, I wrote this song for her called Soldiers of Crack, and like it was huge to be able to rep for her. I think as human beings, like being empowered, being powerful, being full of power, it brings that adrenaline, it brings that endorphin, it brings the dopamine. It's like, oh, somebody thinks I'm worth listening to. Somebody appreciated my poetry. Somebody really liked the work that we did. Let's do it again. Mm-hmm. And so that just fed it. I felt like hip hop gave me the power to express my political views or my religious views or my human views in a way that people would actually listen to them. The ability to just say whatever the fuck I wanted to say. Really, like, that freedom of expression. When I started rapping, let's see, it was like 88. So crack epidemic was huge. Like, crack was hitting our neighborhoods. The gangs were just arriving. And then getting older, when crack moved in, it just changed the whole game. There wasn't a lot of places for us to go. But there were a few, like, community centers that would host little things and, like, call them something else. But I mostly just got a fake ID and went to the club. I mean, really. My sister, I look a lot like her. So, and you couldn't call it hip-hop. You know, somebody told me, someone was doing some research around hip-hop in the area, and they called me up, and they said, hey, did you know you were, like, the first hip-hop group at Bumbershoot? And I was like, no, that doesn't make any sense. There had to be people before me. He's like, I'm doing all this research, and I can't find hip-hop. And I'm like, well, Sir Mix-a-Lot played. He's like, well, other than, like, local, he's like local hip-hop. And I'm like, why? Why did that happen? And I remember when I did the application, we're a live band. So I wrote us as a live band. I didn't write us as a hip-hop group. It's probably why we got under the radar. Because it was like barriers to being hip-hop. They didn't call graffiti art. They called it vandalism. They still do. You know, I get irritated listening to the news. I'm like, just give them a wall. If you're so angry about it, like, give them a place to do it. Like, don't try to lock them up or fine them for doing their thing. Give them space. That's what we all need is space. It was the usual, just the stereotypes of black and brown kids gathering. And weed and seed, you weren't supposed to gather more than 3 people at a time. Otherwise, you were a gang. And they thought our fashion was gang-related. It's so funny that I'm known for battling. There was a time also that I didn't battle at all, specifically because I felt like it was how good of a joke I could make. It wasn't about the content of my lyric or my rhythms or my delivery. It was really about, can I put this other person down in a strategic way? And that didn't feel good to me. And then I sat on this panel, and Medusa was on that panel, who I didn't know at that point. But we were talking, and somehow battle rapping came up, and I talked about how I don't battle rap because of this reason. And she made this point about battle rapping. She says, it's not about putting down another person. It's about sharpening your sword because you're a warrior. And so when we battle, it's about keeping your skills tight and utilizing your quick wit. And I was like, that's an interesting way to look at it. Let me try. So I started signing up for battles, right, that year. And I probably did, 10 over the 2 years. And then I really didn't do much more after that, but I went hard. I was almost always the only woman. It sucks. I remember a specific cipher. I was about 16. So I get up. I'm ready to, go. And I'm right at the front, and this dude next to me's rapping. And I'm like, got my hand out, waiting for the mic to come. And he literally passes it over me to this dude over here. And I get so pissed off. Because I know you saw me. Like, it was that moment. And I looked at the dude, and he was hella weak. I was just like... And I, like, ripped the mic out of his hand and started... It was a written piece that I had. That it was, like, the meanest written piece that I had at the time. And I just was like... And I went so hard. I remember going so hard. I was so angry. And then I just, like, dropped the mic and, like, walked away. But I felt like that's what I had to do as a woman, was rip mics out of people's hands to get the mic. They thought it was cute. This idea of being good for a girl. And I'd be like, I ate you. I ate you for lunch. And it had nothing to do with my gender. My delivery was better than yours. My cadence is better than yours. My tone is better than yours. My content is better than yours. So I think that fed that energy as well. Like knowing that I had to represent for women, knowing that I had to represent, knowing that if I didn't show up, there might not be another one. Hip hop is for everyone. And the skill is not gender based. This is about wit. This is about quick. This is about rhythm. This is about rhyme. Those aren't gendered activities. Art is not gendered. We belong at every table, at every mic. And so if that means I got to show up to represent, then I'm going to show up. It's got to be like that. You know, there's always a little girl in the audience. There's always somebody who goes, oh, maybe I could do that too. And so that's an important legacy for women in hip hop, is to be seen so that folks can see themselves. I think it's always important. Rap, music, all of that was my life. When I was about 25, I felt like I wasn't growing as an artist. I was performing 6 to 8 times a week. I was doing all this stuff, but it was very plateaued. I was like, okay, well, maybe I need to go back to school. Maybe there's something I need to learn. So I'm flipping through the catalog of Seattle Central, and I'm like, business. That's something I need to know about. And I seen drama. I'm like, So I was like, let me try to get in this drama class. It had a prerequisite attached to it. I showed up. I was sitting outside trying to pump myself up to talk to this person to say, you need to let me in your class, even though I don't have the prerequisite. And I ran into Gabriel Teodros. He was walking by right at that time. He's like, yo, Spice, what's up? What's going on? I'm like, I'm trying to get in this class. Just pump myself up. But he's like, oh, Dr. T. I know Dr. T. Let me introduce you. And I'm like, cool. So he walks me in. He's like, Dr. T, Lisa, people need to know. And I'm like, hi, I need to be in your class. And she says, yeah, you need to take intro. And I'm like, no, I need to be in this class. This is the class I need to be in. She's like, you have to take intro. Like, she's looking at me like, and I said, I need to be in this class. And she stops, looks me up and down. Well, you'd have to take intro at the same time. I said, great, no problem, got it. She goes, this ain't no joke. And I said, I ain't no joke. She says, we'll see. Have a seat. I fell in love with theater through this process called ritual poetic drama within the African continuum, which was developed and formed by Dr. Tanya Pettiford-Waits, who became my mentor. I stayed. The next quarter, we did West Side Story. It was totally a musical. I had so much fun. But it was a musical, you know, and the next quarter they were doing a devised piece called Yellow Fever, The Internment. And so I was like, I want to stay. I didn't have any money. I begged my dad to pay for it. And he said, babe, I'll pay for your class if you go to AA with me. And I was like, okay, sure, I'll go to AA with you. So I went to AA with my dad. He paid for my class. And I dove into this process that really changed my life. I was able to use all the skills I had learned up until that point around performance, but this idea of building a community to develop a shared story to highlight something that is so important to talk about, and what happens in that process when forming that community, the relationships that are developed, the truths that are revealed, the revelations that come, and how the power of the story, which is what brought me to hip-hop, right? The power of the story can be multiplied in so many ways through theater and magnified for the participant as well as the audience member, and that experience that you have. And I'm like, oh, this is the next level. I was very angry at that time in my life. I thought human beings were the worst species ever invented by the creator. Like, why would you do this to us? Why would you do this to the planet? Why would you bring us here? We're destroyers. Like, what is our purpose? Like, what on this planet is worth living for? And so the rage that I had all of a sudden had a home, a place where I didn't have to hold it anymore. It could go into the story. It could go into the message. It could go into the character. And then it wasn't eating my soul. it wasn't killing me anymore. And I learned to find joy, made space for joy. And that was something completely new for me. And that's why I followed her when she moved to Virginia, and I ended up getting a master's in ritual poetic drama within the African continuum. And it's a theater pedagogy degree with a specialization in acting, directing, and voice and speech. And I've combined that with my music life and everything that I do through youth development, through creating ensemble work and devised pieces and storytelling. I used to think my purpose was legacy, like I needed to leave something behind, whether it was an album that somebody remembered or a song, a line, like somebody needs to remember this line, this poem, this piece, because then I'll live. Like Shakespeare said, because in black ink, my love will still shine bright. But now I know that my purpose is process. It's not the product. It's the journey. It's supporting folks in their journey. The uncovering, the discovering, the recovering of the possibilities of humanity, of who we can be. That's not always a legacy, right? That's not always something that anybody will remember. But when I'm facilitating my students in writing their rap and being able to tell their story, they'll never forget their process. They might forget my name. They might forget I was there. But they'll remember finding their voice. They'll remember growing into who they are through the process. And that's what hip-hop gave me, was a process to find my own voice. One of the things that I did not like when I started school was Shakespeare. It's funny because I quoted Shakespeare just now, but I hated Shakespeare when I first went into theater school. And it's very much a requirement that you do Shakespeare. I was like, he's not the best poet ever. He ain't better than Tupac. Like, you're tripping. Like how is, I was like, 8 Ball is as good as Shakespeare, in my opinion. And then the Los Angeles Shakespeare folks came to Richmond, Virginia, where I was at, and they were doing this program for black and brown kids to bring together, because they were very separate, and violence and racial violence between the black and brown kids. And so they brought them together to do this play, Romeo and Juliet. And I was hired as a teaching artist. We sat down for the table read, and the young man who was playing, I think it was Tybalt, said, "Oh, holla, cuz." It's the first line of the play. And I was like, my eyeballs were like, wait, what? And I started reading along, and all of a sudden, like, the beats came in my head. I was like, oh, this is hip-hop. Shit. And I started turning it, and I was seeing the stanzas. And I was like, how come nobody told me Shakespeare's hip-hop? And then I started learning more about Shakespeare, and I was like, oh, this isn't supposed to be on a pedestal at all. They've done him wrong. This is supposed to be regular folk stuff. Like, this is body jokes. This is battling. This is wit, quick wit. These are put downs. This is more like hip-hop than anything I've seen at this place. And so I started rapping on my monologues for school. Next year, we had to do Shakespeare monologues, so I started rapping on my monologues to learn them. And it was like blowing my mind. And I was like, oh, I understand this so much. I love this. And I started doing it with my friends. I was like, hey, try this out. And so we started putting on beats and rapping all our monologues and trying to learn new ones. And a teacher found out about it, and they were like, come do a workshop with the kids or with the students. And now I still do it, hip-hop Shakespeare, but I would brought that to the school. When they had to do Shakespeare in lit class, we wouldn't like just read it, to be or not to be. We were rapping it. We were talking about it. We were talking about the play on words, comparing it to like Tupac lyrics. They would bring in their favorite rap lyrics. So I used hip hop to teach a lot of literary, a lot of English. I mean, hip hop, like rock and roll, never die. It just morphs and changes with the times. What I heard inside hip hop was everything. Every other genre belongs in hip hop. We encompass all of it. So how could it ever go anywhere? Hip hop is a way of life. I don't have to listen to hip hop to be hip hop. It's not just a culture, but it's making something out of nothing. Like, you are all you need to make art. I don't need any tools, audience, or anything. just, and that's what hip hop is, right? You are the artwork, you are the instrument, and that's the beautiful thing.
Here's a little story.